Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I'm your host, Josh Peck. Tonight we have a very special returning guest, of course, a fan favorite of the Sharpening Report and everything we do at Daily Renegade, L.A. Marzulli. L.A. Marzulli, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
It's great to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me on. And we just had a little conversation uh, before we started recording, but you've got your full beard and I just shaved. So there you go.
Yeah, I was telling, for the audience, I was telling LA, this is the first time I've seen him clean shaven. So all of you guys get to see it for the first time too.
There you go.
Well, we have an exciting topic, one of my favorite topics. This topic is actually the thing that really got me curious about the stranger parts of the Bible anyway. Just the topic of aliens, UFOs, what are they, and how can something like that be defined through a biblical worldview? And you actually have two new films that we can talk about. You have Roswell Revisited, Exoneration,
Yes.
and Roswell
Yes.
Revisited, The Debris Field. Why did you make two films about Roswell?
Well, we needed to. I mean, Exoneration. We didn't know what the title of it was, and so I'm in the edit booth, and you know what that's like. And there was this one part of the film, Exoneration, where I'm talking to Jesse Marcel Jr.'s daughter, and I go, well, I mean, hopefully this will exonerate your grandfather. And I'm watching it, and I go, there's the film right there, Exoneration. So the backstory, because I know a lot of people don't know about it. 1947, end of June, early July, something crashes down in the middle of nowhere, about 2 hours outside of Roswell. I mean, if you take a helicopter, it's much closer, but if you're driving, it's like a 2 hour trip today. So in 47, it's longer than that. But the bottom line is, there's eyewitnesses that talk about seeing a very bright object coming in, and very fast, very fast. That's not a weather balloon.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's Will DeMont. So it's like, and his wife, they both see this thing and they go on the record stating this is what they saw. This very, very moving very quickly, and it was bathed in light. It's not a weather balloon. That's the first thing. So enter Mac Brazel. And Mac Brazel, it's his ranch, and he's leasing it, the King Ranch. And so he's leasing the land. It's free range cattle, just what it is today. Nothing's changed in 76 years, still free range cattle. And he goes out to check on the cattle, and he sees this debris field, which is like 200 yards long. And he's taken aback by this. He's like, what is this stuff? So he takes a few pieces of it and goes in to Roswell and talks to the sheriff. The sheriff goes, hey, you better get over to the 509th and bombing group and talk to them. This might be something from them. So Brazel goes over and he speaks to Jesse Marcel Sr., and they drive out to the ranch. Backstory: 509th Bombing Group is the only nuclear-equipped bombing group on the planet at that time. They dropped Hiroshima, they dropped Nagasaki. They dropped the bombs on both of those sites. That's the 509th. So they're stationed in Roswell, New Mexico. So this gets really deep, and for me and for you, it's extremely intriguing. Why does this thing show up at Roswell? And David Flynn wrote a wonderful paper about that, tying it in with the Crabwood Glyph crop circle over in London years ago. But I mean, I'm hopping all over the plate. So back to 1947, Jesse Marcel goes out with Mac Brazel, and he sees this debris field, which is a couple hundred yards long. There's stuff scattered everywhere, and he's never seen anything like it. He picks up some of it, puts it in a box, cardboard box, and on the way back to the Roswell base, he stops off at his house. It's like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever. Wakes up his son and his wife and sets the stuff up in the kitchen, brings them in. Take a good look at this. You may never see anything like this again. This is from another world. And Jesse Marcel Jr. is like 11 years old at the time. Now, I interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr. years ago, right before he passed away. So it's as close to the actual event as I've ever gotten, because this is it. And so Jesse Marcel Sr. takes the stuff, bags it up, goes back to the base. Walter G. Hout is like a press secretary. And so he gives the information because, people saw this thing, are not sure what it was. There's multiple witnesses that see this something coming down. And Walter G. Haught publishes RAAF, captures flying disc, flying saucer. It's right there, July 8th. Right there. July 8th, here it is. We've got a flying saucer. Remember, a few weeks earlier, Kenneth Arnold coins the term flying saucer.
Right.
When he sees at Mount Rainier, when he sees those discs flying in formation very, very fast by Mount Rainier, he coins it flying saucer. Just a few weeks later, you get the Roswell thing. RAAF captures a flying saucer. That's the front page. July 9th, there's another story. General Ramey says, excitement not justified. Empty saucer. And this is where the whole weather balloon story is floated.
Yeah, why did that happen? Why was that version of events redacted by General Ramey?
That's a 3-hour conversation, but we'll get to it. But we don't have 3 hours.
Right.
But we'll get to that. That I'll say this. That sets the paradigm. That's the umbrella. That's the way we're going to deal with this thing. That comes from higher ups. And this is, until 2017 with Commander David Fravor, this was the way the game was played. And if you got too close, you might get killed. And we know people that we believe were taken out. Can't prove it, but I suspect foul play with David Flynn, for starters. I really do. I think he was taken out. Now, that's conjecture. I can't prove it. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. I'm just saying I think he was taken out by somebody. But that's conjecture. So July 9th, this thing is rolled out, and everything is redacted. I mean, everything is like, it's a totally different story. It's a weather balloon. So I interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr., and it's as close to the event as I've ever gotten. And he's told me to think that his father, who's the intelligence officer of the 509th Bombing Group, the intelligence officer, this guy is trained in everything that's out there. He knows what the Russians have, the Chikoms have, the Czechoslovakians have, the ex-Nazi stuff. This guy knows everything. I mean, unless it's like super top secret, and that's what they try to tell us, that Marcel didn't know anything about the Mogul weather balloon. The problem with Mogul, it's not till years later. Roswell, case closed. Oops, we blew it again, didn't we? We can't even lie well. Unbelievable. But I digress. So we have a clip from Jesse Marcel Sr. He's back in the debris field decades later, probably shortly before he passes away. And he's got a Southern accent, kind of like this, but it's from Louisiana, so it's even different than what I'm saying right here. But he's got to really listen. And so he goes, I went out to the debris field with Mac Brazo. I would have never found this thing without, you didn't know where it was. I mean, it was out in the middle of nowhere. So we're out there when we're flying drones way up high, doing panoramas, 360s, and we're in the middle of nowhere. It's unbelievable. So, Jesse Marcel Sr., this is decades later, he was in the debris field, and he's going, there was metal, pieces of the craft, metal, that was like, 2 foot, roughly, 2 foot by 3 foot. You couldn't bend it. It was as thin, he says, it was as thin as the aluminum foil in a cigarette pack. That's what he's comparing. That's like super thin. He said, you couldn't bend it. You couldn't hit it with a sledgehammer. It bounced right off of it. And then he goes, he talks about the press conference when he's trotted in, and in front of him originally was pieces of the wreckage. He goes out of the room, he comes back in, the wreckage is gone, what he collected, and there's a weather balloon. But the weather balloon is brand new. It doesn't show any type of wear from being outdoors for a week or whatever it is, right? And there's a picture, it's iconic, where he's kneeling down, he's kind of squatting, and he's got a piece of the weather balloon, and he's kind of like this, looking up at Ramey, like, you've got to be kidding me, right? And he's a patsy. He's the Lee Harvey Oswald of ufology, in my opinion. Jesse Marcel Sr. He's a patsy. He's a fall guy. So in this interview that we have in the film, decades later, Jesse Marcel Sr. goes, they wanted me to say something, but that's not what I did. I wasn't trained for that. So Ramey just said, nothing to see here. Stop talking about it. It's just a weather balloon. And then he says this, and we freeze it and font it. But we both knew differently. We both knew differently.
Wow.
He looks right at the camera and says it. And so there's also the deathbed confession of Walter G. Hout, who we published it. And basically, Hout is stating on the record. Now it's deathbed. It's an affidavit, sworn affidavit that was open at the time of his death. So why does Walter Hout feel compelled to do this to begin with? Why is he doing this affidavit? Because he's burdened. Because he knows the American people have been lied to. Oh, and by the way, we were lied to over the weekend with Major General Ryder. Look, we've studied the crashed UFOs. There's absolutely nothing to see here. It's all swamp gas and weather balloons and,
Yeah.
Excuse me, what about David Fravor? What about Luis Elizondo? What about Chris Mellon? Those are all your guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so something's going on here. Somebody's lying.
Yeah.
And it ain't Commander David Fravor or Elizondo, in my humble opinion, or Christopher Mellon or Nick Pope. There's somebody else here that, the old school, the old guard is trying to manage the thing and put it back in the box. Well, it's not going to happen. So Marcel says that. So we flew up to Montana and we interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow, Linda Marcel, and his best friend, one of his best friends, who was a surgeon. Jesse Marcel Jr. was a surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Oh, I can't believe I can't. Yeah. It's like right there. Come out. Oh, I can't believe I can't think of his name. Anyway, so he started the Jesse Marcel Jr. Library.
Mm-hmm.
So we interviewed the doc, and we've interviewed Linda and also Tim Alberino up there, which was great. Then we came back here and interviewed Denise Marcel, Jesse's daughter, and then we have other witnesses that come on, including one woman who came up to me at a conference in Dallas a while back, telling me a very interesting story. So her husband is in the hospital, and this elderly nurse comes in and says, "Can I pray for you?" They say, "Sure." She prays. The women strike up a conversation. Where are you from? Well, I'm from Roswell, New Mexico. And she goes, the witness on camera goes, "Is there any truth about what happened?" And she looks around and she goes, "Yes, but I can't talk about it." And she said the nurses who were there, she got there shortly after the event. The nurses who were there were shipped off to a convent, apparently, in Oklahoma. Now, I can't vet that. I can't vet it. I mean, I could hire a private detective and start nosing around. Not too many convents in not Oklahoma City. It's the other major city. But
Tulsa?
I'm not doing it. Yeah, it's near Tulsa. Yeah. So, I mean, how many convents would be in Tulsa? Right. It'd be very easy to go back and track that. Should be anyway. Somebody might spill the beans. So they were shipped off to Tulsa. We've got in the film Jim and Carolyn Rankin, who were end-of-life caretakers, and they were taking care of Colonel Hill, who was OSS. OSS is the forerunner of the CIA. And they, about a month before Hill passes away, Carolyn asks him a question. Now, she goes there every day. They have a rapport. Carolyn and Jim and Carolyn are pastors, for starters, so she's a real straight shooter. And she says, "What about Roswell?" And he dips his head down like this, and then he kind of brings it back up, and he goes, "What about it?" And Carolyn asks him, was it a weather balloon? And he dips his head down again, lets out a very deep sigh, and goes, "It wasn't a weather balloon." Looks right at her. It wasn't a weather balloon. And in my opinion, this is like a death. He knows he's going to die. Yeah. That's what Jim and Carolyn are there. They're taking his estate and selling things off. And this is how I met them. They got a hold of me because I actually bought some of the stuff from his estate. That's the connection. I never met him. He passed away before I met him. He died. But he was flown to Roswell within 48 hours. He was OSS. He was an interrogator. They were bodies. one of them was still alive. He tried to communicate with it. And now we've heard this from multiple witnesses. There's another witness that comes in on the film, and Frankie Rowe. And Frankie Rowe states on the record that my father, who was a fire guy. So before I get to that, it's a skip site. The craft comes in and hits the ground. That's where the debris field, where Marcel found the debris. Hits the ground, but it comes back up and goes several miles. And that's where the crash site is. That's where the bodies were found. The crash site allegedly has a fence all the way around it. The skip site where we were does not, but they have seated metal spikes in the ground. So you can't find anything with a metal detector. But I'm getting ahead of my story here because you can. In the film, we show something that came from white sand. So the craft comes down like this. It hits. Again, it goes up. The second time it hits, it just explodes. And like shards are flying like a bullet out of a gun. Josh, they didn't get it all. They didn't get it all. That metal went into the ground 6 or 8 inches. And that's our second film. And we discovered 2 pieces of the metal, but I'm getting ahead of my story. So Marcel is the fall guy. This begins the cover up until 2017, where you saw swamp gas reflecting in a weather balloon that was tangled up in a flock of geese that was reflecting the planet Venus. That's what you saw. Oh, okay. It's exactly like Men in Black.
Yeah.
Click. I mean, it's exactly what it is. It's predictive programming. So when this stuff comes out, everybody just goes yawn. Oh, we've seen Star Trek and Star Wars and and V and everything else. So oh, what's for dinner tonight, honey? It's like they don't realize this is the coming great deception.
Yeah.
This will change everything on the planet instantaneously, and I think it has to do conjecture. I think it has to do something with a nuclear event. So that's the nexus. That's not nexus. That's the umbrella, the overarching view of the first one, exoneration. There's other witnesses that come in. The second film, in the debris field. So we go to Roswell. We're up in Montana interviewing all those people. Then about a month passes and we go to Roswell. And we go to the debris field. And we interviewed Frank Kimbler and Dennis Balthauser. Both of these guys are immersed in the whole Roswell legend. I mean, Balthauser's been studying this thing for decades. And Frank Kimbler has been out to the debris field maybe 20 times, and he's found metal. So he takes us out there. And, we're out there with him with metal detectors and drones and cameras, and we're filming. And Jim Peterson, our sound guy's there. Gil Zimmerman, my business partner, he's doing all the cinematography. I'm your intrepid host, Elliot Marzulli, talking to Frank Kimbler. So the 3 of us, Gil, Jim, and myself, are praying. All of a sudden, and we go, Lord, open our eyes, show us what you want to see here. And all of a sudden, Kimbler goes, hey, guys, I got something, because he's got a metal detector out there. Sure enough, beep, all of this is on film. All of it's on film. And we go running over. He's got a little garden spade, and he's digging down 6 to 8 inches. And the bottom line is, after he gets it out, and we show it in the film. It's all on film. We found 2 pieces of the metal. We've had the metal tested, and the closest thing that comes to it is an aluminum alloy, the 7000 series. But it's not a direct match, Josh. It's not. The closest thing they have to it is an aluminum 7000 series of aluminum, but it's not a match. The isotopic ratios are different, but it's as close as they can get to it. Here's the rub. Here's something to think about, that the 7000 series wasn't invented till 1953.
Oh, wow.
So what's that doing out in the debris field in the middle of nowhere?
Right.
So was it back engineered? Conjecture. Yeah, the 7000 series was back engineered from the debris that was flown from Hangar 84 to Wright-Patterson. And we know it was flown to Wright-Pat because Dennis Balthauser interviewed the pilot. I mean, we know it. We know that that's what it was. So we also, when we're in Roswell, and I just, I've learned this over the years, not because I'm some pushy investigator. I've just learned over the years that you gotta go for it sometimes. So we rented this van from a tour group, and we rented the whole thing. So it was just our team in the van. And this guy's giving us the tour. That's Jesse Marcel Sr.'s house. The old base was here. We showed some of it in the film. So now we're by Hangar 84, the infamous Hangar 84, where allegedly all the wreckage from the craft was stored. So it's surrounded by a fence. There is a front door, but we're not going to knock on the front door. So I see some guy smoking a cigarette on the other side of the fence. So I go up and I go, hey, we're a really small film crew outside of Southern California. Is there any chance we can get in here? Yeah, come on up to the front. I'll see what I can do.
Oh, wow.
So and it's all in the film. So we go walking up or running up, actually. The camera's going like this, So we get in there and they put me on the phone with Bull, who's the head guy. And I'm on the phone and it's all on film, on the phone talking, and I go like this. Bull's coming down in 20 minutes. Yes, we can go in. He comes down. He brings us into a conference room. We interview him. I say, can we go in? He goes, sure. So he leads us in, and I'm like, it's all on film again. I'm like this. I'm like a kid in a candy store because I've seen this since I was a kid. I've known about it, read about it. It's like you. I mean, you go into Hangar 84, you're just going, oh, my God. You can't even believe it, right? And nothing has changed. I mean, maintenance is done, but it's the same hangar. And going back to Walter G. Hout states in that affidavit that he went into Hangar 84 and he saw the wreckage and he saw the craft and he saw the bodies under a tarp. That's all in there. It's all in the affidavit. So why is Hout lying? Why is he making a sealed affidavit? Because he knows that everybody's been bamboozled. And just like Colonel Hill, I think it weighs on these guys, and they all do deathbed confessions. So here's another deathbed confession. About a month before this woman passes away, she's riding in a car with her grandson in Roswell. She's worked at Roswell Army Base all her life, basically. So he's in the car with her. This is not in the film. He came up to me at a conference, and it's on my YouTube channel, L.A. Marzulli. And he goes, so Grandma, this is Hangar 84. Is this where they took the wreckage and the bodies? And she looks at him and she goes, yes, that's where the bodies were kept. And he thinks she's just kidding. She's not kidding. And she then elaborates, we know that the bodies were taken there, but they wouldn't let us in to see them. They wouldn't let us in to see them. So, obviously the film, Exoneration's an hour and a half. And in the debris field's about 65 minutes, something like that. So we don't, we've been on for a few minutes here, 25 minutes. We're barely, if you want to see it, and I would pray that your audience would be interested enough and to go and watch the film. I think they're the best films that Gil and I have produced so far. It's real investigative. Let me move this over here, get out of the sunlight. It's real investigative journalism. We are Dr. Richard O'Connor, up in Montana. He's the anesthesiologist, one of Jesse Marcel Jr.'s best friends. So he's on the record. Dr. O'Connor's just going like, this man, Jesse Marcel Jr., he's one of the most stand-up guys I've ever met in my life. To think that he's making up a story, and that's what Denise Marcel and Linda Marcel, everybody piles on and basically says, he's a fall guy. He was a patsy. And there's a sign. We show this in the film. There's a Dick D'Amato who was in Congress, had Jesse Marcel Jr. come to the White House, and they went down into the secret room, into a skiff, and soundproof room, no bugs, and Whitley Strieber's book was on the table. And D'Amato goes, see that book? Everything in it's true. And he said, if you get harassed, if this keeps up, you call me. And we show the paper with Dick D'Amato's private phone number on it. And so people were pushing back. Marcel Jr. is gone. I did interview him. We reenact that interview in the film because it was just a handwritten interview. I sent him questions. he sent me back answers. That's how that happened. So, I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. It's lamarzulli.net to buy the videos, or if you just want to stream them, you can go to streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net, and, $5-6 you can watch the film.
Well, that's great. And I highly suggest that everybody out there does, because I think the work that you're doing in this field is second to none. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And every person needs access to this information. And I think that's
I agree.
I think that's the best place to do it. I got a couple more questions for you, but we're going to do that in the members only section. So for everybody watching for free on YouTube or Rumble, please do me a favor, head on over to dailyrenegade.com and get a membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. If you can do it, I would suggest getting the $100 a year, because it's cheaper in the long run. Essentially, you get 2 months for free, and you'll get the rest of this whole interview, plus the rest of every whole interview and video that we do, plus lots of updates, lots of stuff that's not available on YouTube due to censorship. That's actually why we created Daily Renegade in the first place. And now that the website has been updated, there's even a community tab there that works a lot like Facebook, just without all the censorship. You're allowed to post whatever you want, and as long as you're nice and respectful and not causing trouble, we don't allow trolling or anything like that. But we haven't had any problems like that, because let's face it, trolls are pathetic. They're not going to spend their own money to go and troll somebody. They'll do it for free on Facebook. Yes.
Exactly.
So head on over to dailyrenegade.com right now for the rest of this interview and so much more. Members, if you're watching this on the website, just hang on the line. You don't have to do anything. Everybody else, again, please check out L.A. Marzulli's most recent films, and check out all of his films, lamarzulli.net, and then he gave you the streaming, which I'm going to link in the description below. So check that out, and until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Take care, and God bless.